Ruy Lopez opening, Berlin, Rio Gambit accepted, 5.Re1 Nd6 6.Nxe5. Balanced, neither player ever had an advantage. That game was pretty competitive. Both players had an amazing opening. That was an incredible middle game by both players. Both players had incredible precision in the end game. Sharp games are frequently the result of starting with the king's pawn, since it dominates the center and frees up the bishop and queen on the light squares. A typical answer is e5, which builds a position in the middle, controls d4, and frees up the queen and bishop on the dark square. The move nf3 advances the knight toward the center, engages the e5 piece in combat, and sets up a castle. nc6 defends the pawn on e5, advances the knight toward the center, and scans the d4 square. The Ruy Lopez opening develops the bishop to immediately attack the knight on c6, the lone defender of the e5 pawn. nf6 advances the knight and engages in an attack on the exposed e4 pawn. Castling gets the king out of the center and activates the rook. nxe4 captures the e4 pawn and places the knight in the center of the board, where it controls many important squares. 1 rupee activates the rook and attacks the knight on e4. nd6 retreats the knight to a central square that attacks the bishop on b5 and controls the e4 and c4 squares. nxe5 captures the e5 pawn, centralizes the knight and attacks the knight on c6. This protects the attacked knight. The bishop is now on a square that is more secure. This keeps the material balance in check with good commerce. Backs off. Castling gets the king to a safer square, out of the center of the board, while also developing a rook. Castling to the same side of the board as the opponent avoids some of the attacking associated with opposite side castling. The bishop will be better off as a result of this. This wins a tempo by threatening a rook and forcing it to move away. This move puts the rook on a safer square. This fights against the opposing rook for the open file. This threatens to win a pawn. This stops the opponent from being able to win a pawn. This exchange is fair. Recaptures. Games Master. It is the final book action. Among the best actions. It is quite good. While not a mistake, that is also not the wisest course of action. That's good. This ignores a superior strategy for protecting a pawn that was being attacked. It is incorrect. This disregards a more effective strategy for molding a bishop. It is incorrect. By growing a bishop from its initial square, this activates it. That's good. As a result, the bishop grows and gains flexibility on the long diagonal. It is quite good. It is a fair deal after all captures. It is ideal. This reveals an attack that poses a threat to a queen. It is ideal. This deters an assault on a queen who is weak. It is quite good. That is a logical response. It is quite good. This suggests exchanging items of equivalent value. It is ideal. This keeps the material balance in check with good commerce. It is ideal. Backs off. It is ideal. This puts the opposing rook in a position to lose control of the open file. It is ideal. This exchange is fair. It is ideal. Recaptures. It is ideal. Very precise. It is best. This misses a chance to kick a knight. It is incorrect. There were worse maneuvers, but there were also much better ones. It is incorrect. Perfectly on point. It is ideal. It is a fair deal after all captures. It is ideal. Backs off. It is ideal. The knight is thus brought to safety. That's good. The pawn is now in a safe position. It is ideal. The knight can now control more squares as a result. That's good. This keeps the material balance in check with good commerce. It is ideal. Recaptures. It is ideal. As a result, the bishop may now control more squares because it is in a better position. It is ideal. This poses the risk of producing a passed pawn. It is ideal. This exchange is fair. This makes it impossible for the adversary to make a passed pawn. It is quite good. Backs off. This poses the risk of producing a passed pawn. White is equal at this point in the endgame. It is ideal. A wise decision. It is quite good. The bishop is now on a square that is more secure. This poses the risk of producing a passed pawn. It is quite good. This divides up parts by launching multiple attacks at once. It is ideal. It is a fair deal after all captures. It is ideal. This is the only good move. It is a great move. The bishop is now on a square that is more secure. It is quite good. The best choice is this one. It is ideal. This avoids the knight's check. It is ideal. The knight is thus brought to safety. It is quite good. A powerful play. It is quite good. The knight is now on a square that is more secure. It is ideal. What I would have advised is that. It is ideal. This shifts the bishop to a square with more activity, giving it greater scope. It is quite good. Very precise. It is best. Among the best actions. It is quite good. In the endgame, an active king is essential, and removing it from the rear rank is the first step. It is quite good. By moving it from the back rank, this activates the king in the endgame. It is quite good. This exchange is fair. It is ideal. Recaptures. It is ideal. That is a logical response. It is quite good. A wise decision. It is quite good. Perfectly on point. It is ideal. A powerful play. It is quite good. Among the best actions. It is quite good. Both players were equally favored, which was balanced. It was a really competitive game. Both players had fantastic starts. Both players played fantastic middle game there. In the final round, both players were incredibly precise. The best choice is this one. It's ideal. Both players were equally favored, which was balanced. It was a really competitive game. Both players had fantastic starts. Both players played fantastic middle game there. In the final round, both players were incredibly precise.